Hello, welcome back to another F1 Fantasy video. My name's Tom and I'm going to be discussing team selection for Hungary in this video. It's going to be broken down into a couple of different sections. Obviously, a quick recap as to what happened in Silverstone. As you can see on screen, this is exactly what happened in Silverstone, DNF City. And then I'll have a quick look at the driver focus. I'm going to have a look at the Haas's this weekend because I think the Haas's are really in the ascendancy and should be in a lot of our minds. I know they're kind of the unexciting C-tier assets. They're not going to get that many points, but I think it's an important part of our team structure. And I think the Haas's are really on the radar this week, so I'm going to discuss them briefly. And then I'll have a quick look at my actual team selection. It's obviously quite early team selection at the moment. We've still got well over a week to go before any deadlines. Speaking of deadlines, I will likely, hopefully be able to do a deadline stream going into the Hungary Grand Prix deadline. So just stay tuned for that. I am actually on holiday next week, so I won't be doing any content during the week, but hopefully on the actual deadline day on the Saturday, I might be able to get a stream together. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, we'll discuss Hungary, sort of looking on from a week or so in advance. So first things first though, Silverstone. And in Silverstone, I used the wildcard. I moved away from the Red Bull Norris build. I went for the double B tier driver lineup. I thought it brought more balance to the team, and I thought it had better prospects for gaining budget. And I feel like if I hadn't been unlucky with the DNFs, I know it's a big if because the DNFs happened, can't change that. If I hadn't been unlucky with the DNFs, two reliability issues, completely impossible to predict sort of thing. I think if I'd been a bit lucky and, just avoided the DNFs, it would have been a really good week. George Russell was on course, maybe not for the win after all, after, the McLaren came through and Verstappen had some good pace, but I think he was certainly on course for at least top 4, possibly podium. Top 4, maybe top 5 if he fell away a little bit, but that's still a good amount of points to be fair. Piastri got really unlucky, I think, as well. Kind of got screwed over by the McLaren strategy, trying to focus on Norris. They left him out for that extra lap. He lost so much time, which is really unfortunate as a 2 times DRS booster of Oscar Piastri. He had the pace to potentially win the race. We'll never know, but that's kind of where we're at when we're putting when I'm putting the 2 times on Piastri. It's kind of the risk we take because we know that Norris is kind of the number 1 driver, even if they wouldn't admit that. I do think Norris is gonna be up there as taking priority, particularly as he had in that instance track position on Piastri. So fair enough, I guess, but they really should have done the double stack. Anyway, long story short, Piastri still did okay as my 2 times, didn't do anything horrible. Got me the 23 points, which I'm fine with. Sargent, super happy with, didn't DNF and got 3 overtakes, and he still lost value, which is expected, but actually a really solid race. What did he qualify? P12, I want to say, and finish P11. Exactly that. Qualified P12, finished P11, 3 overtakes, good positions gained. It's, like I say, still dropped in value, but when you pick Logan Sargent, all you really care about is he doesn't DNF, so happy with that. Pierre Gasly obviously did DNF, very unfortunate that. Gearbox issue, didn't even start the race. Very annoying because, we had him perfectly set up. I think a lot of us went for Pierre Gasly, starting back at the grid. And although it didn't quite work out that way because of Perez's starting from the pit lane, etc. But even so, Pierre Gasly looked hot property this week, and he was hot property until his gearbox packed it in. So very frustrating, but there we go. Can't do anything about it. Minus 20, move on. And then Hulkenberg did phenomenally well. The upgrade, Magnussen didn't have the upgrade. Hulkenberg did. Qualified in 6th, finished in 6th. That's really impressive for the Haas's, who are kind of nowhere. Back in Monaco, absolutely nowhere, and now look at them. So yeah, great. And then the constructors also pretty solid. Obviously, if Russell just finished the race, would have been a lot stronger, but there you go. That's kind of where I'm at with the wild card. Went with the kind of B tier lineup and got punished because of the DNFs. I think if it wasn't for the DNFs, I would have been fine. As I touched on at the beginning of the video, the Haas's are hot property at the moment. They Hulkenberg had an upgrade in Silverstone. I believe Magnussen will almost certainly have it in Hungary. Surely it's been it'll be a couple of weeks break. I'm sure they'll stick it on Magnussen's car as well. And it's really impressive. They were basically the 5th fastest team, and Hulkenberg had really, really phenomenal pace. It was potentially helped out by a little bit with Perez and Leclerc just being nowhere to be seen for various reasons. But nevertheless, fantastic qualifying pace, as we know Hulkenberg can provide, and a fantastic finish as well. Just really, really impressive. Gets the 0.5 million rise again, as did Magnussen. And yeah, they're really, really good, not just in terms of points, but just cheap enablers that also get you budget gains. So I think it's time to really pile in on the Haas. He says that, just a few weeks ago, we had the disaster of Monaco, where, record scoring, was it -30 something for the constructor? And yeah, it's just horrendous in Monaco. But ever since Monaco, they've been pretty phenomenal for kind of the back half of the grid constructor. So I think they're really, really impressive, and I think the main reason that they're really, really impressive, to be fair, it's got to be the overtakes. Look at the overtakes. We know the way fantasy points system works, that the guys that are not finishing anywhere near the podium are heavily reliant on positions gained in overtakes. We know this for the last couple of years, and look at them. Overtakes first for Magnussen, overtake king, and third for Hulkenberg. And I know a few of you will be saying, like, yeah, maybe that's helped out a lot by what happened in Canada, and admittedly, maybe it was, but I don't think, across the season, they're still like right up there, alongside Stroll, funny enough, who is also kind of off the radar. Now he's moved into the B tier. Just a quick aside. Don't pick Stroll. But yeah, I do think that in terms of overtakes, they're just, these drivers, they like overtaking quite clearly. And Magnussen, I believe, was pretty hot in the overtakes last year as well. So yeah, I think overtakes are very important for these guys at the back, and they've proven so far, halfway through the season, and first and third is just pretty phenomenal for them. Positions gained, obviously Magnussen in the green there as second, which is also excellent. Like, this is optimal for the cheap guys. So Magnussen, what a pick he is, because he's first for overtakes, second for positions gained. I've just said that's how they score their points, which is phenomenal. Hulkenberg, interestingly, is 12th, which is why I've highlighted him in kind of the red. Like, oh, red, he's 12th. 12 for cost out of 20, or 21 technically, I guess. But yeah, I think Hulkenberg, although he's 12th, it's not actually that bad, I don't think, because we know he qualifies very well. So you'd expect him to drop back. And yes, he has to some extent, being 12th on the grid for positions gained. But it's not as bad as you'd think. When he's put in a Haas, which is, up until the last few races, been a pretty terrible car, get it into Q3, he's not actually dropping back that badly on the whole. And now he's got this upgrade. I do believe that Hulkenberg is particularly, very capable of getting into Q3. And as he's proven on the one race in Silverstone at least, he's proven he can hold it there. So really, really interesting with Hungary. I can never always get the two mixed up. Hungary and Hungaroring. It just becomes one mushy word. But anyway, as we got Hungary coming up, plenty of slow speed corners around Hungary. We know the Haas, at least earlier on in the season, was good at. Whether that's the case quite so much coming through this new upgrade, I don't know. Will they retain that slow speed prowess? I'm hoping so, because I want to probably try and capitalise on them, get their points, get their budget game whilst we can. So yeah, kind of overall, I think the Haas look great. And in fact, why don't we pop over to my team, where you can see my team leading out of Silverstone going into Hungary. You can see Hulkenberg is the only representative of the Haas, but I kind of want more. How much more do we want? Well, I have dabbled with something drastic. I have dabbled. I'm not sure what you guys think, but this is going somewhere. This is going somewhere pretty extreme. Like I say, it's potentially looking at bringing in the Haas constructor, and this is very out there. It's very risky, particularly looking in the top 5k or anyone in the top 10k sort of region. Dropping to a C tier constructor at this stage could be a big risk, but the Haas are filling me with so much confidence. I'm seriously considering this. I'm not saying I'm going to do this. I'm definitely not locking in, and I want to see the practice sessions, but they're consistently gaining price gains. If they do well, it's 500,000 compared to 0.1 or 0.3 for the likes of Ferraris or Mercedes. So you've got a much easier chance of getting that price gain. You get a bigger price gain, and that also enables you to get someone like Lewis Hamilton in here. You could fiddle about and do some -10s or whatever and get Norris, and then have one of the Saubers. But I personally like this. I've kind of got into bed with the B tier lineup here, with Russell and Piastri, and why not chuck another B tier driver in alongside, kind of the best C tier assets in my opinion. I do strongly believe that this is actually a genuine team. I don't know how many people are just thinking what the hell, Tom, get to the real team selection, but you've got to think outside the box sometimes, and I don't know if this is outlandish. I feel like it probably is. I don't see many people talking about this sort of team structure, but I genuinely think it might be of interest. And if we flick it to F1 Fantasy Tools, what a great website, I've just put it onto the optimal teams from Silverstone. Admittedly, doesn't for some reason doesn't contain points for fastest pit stops. I don't know if that's actually still true. But anyway, I've put the budget here is 122 million, but you can see there's budgets in here 113, 115, 111, which all scored super well. And look at the main bulk of these optimal teams. They involve the Haas constructor as well as at least one or in some cases two Haas drivers. And I'm not going to say that the Haas are going to smash it every week. They're not going to be phenomenal every week, but I think this kind of goes to show that they are really good enablers. They're good for price gain because they're the C tier. They've got this upgrade. Magnussen's getting the upgrade as well. They're great for overtakes. They're looking solid for positions gained. They enable you to get all these B tier drivers in, which gets you more budget and stretch, better balance in your team. I'm call me crazy, but I'm seriously considering it. So obviously, like I said, practice sessions aside, we'll consider it. But let's well, that's not what I want to click on. Let's have a quick look at the race results as well, because just to really exemplify exactly how strong the Haas have been recently, if we pop it down to the constructors, you can see the Haas here since that minus 65. It's like the only shade of red in this entire grid. It's such a bad score, but after the minus 65, they're scoring seriously well. A bit of a dip in Spain, but then 34, 41, 30, and even before that disaster in Monaco, they're scoring pretty well. Compare that to the likes of the other guys down here. At the beginning of the season, everyone was hot on the likes of Aston Martin and the RBs. The Haas have consistently kind of matched or exceeded them pretty much throughout the season. If it wasn't that minus 65, I think we'd see that average a bit higher, well, a lot higher than the 15.4 that it shows on here, and I think they'd be a lot closer. I haven't done the maths, but I think they'd be a lot closer, if not even touching the Aston Martins there potentially. But I think the Haas, they're just so cheap in comparison. They're like less than half the price of a Mercedes, for example. It is a big risk. It is definitely a big risk dropping to this kind of team build, but it's something I'm very much open to and will consider further. And the fact that they're showing up in the optimal teams again, and I remember seeing this early on in the season, the Haas were kind of floating around optimal teams earlier on in the season as well. In fact, can we let's pop it back, because I think I want to kind of back this up a little bit. If we can back it back up to the optimal teams, if we just change it to, I don't know, Australia as a random one, see how much Haas coverage comes in. Oh, look at that. See the white? Oh wow, look at that. In fact, it's just update itself. This was obviously back when we had far smaller budgets, so it's done it to 104 budget. But again, like the Haas, all over the place. This is way back in Australia. Let's pick another random one. I'm literally picking these at random. Miami, not quite so much coverage there, to be fair. Maybe the team structure of Leclerc doubling up with the big constructors there, but you can still see Hulkenberg sort of in the periphery there. Let's just do one more. We won't pick Monaco, obviously. Let's pick one more, like Imola, for example. Just kind of see where we're at. It's just kind of interesting to see. Again, yeah, we see lots of Magnussens in there, but not quite the extent of the Haas constructor. But nevertheless, I feel like I've probably talked enough about the Haas to kind of show you how excited I am about them. But anyway, that's definitely a team structure I'm looking at. The Mercedes looking particularly racy at the moment, with further upgrades hinted at coming in Hungary. They're already P1, P2 from qualifying in Silverstone. I think we've had a couple of polls here in the past from Hamilton and Russell in the last couple of years as well. We've got further upgrades coming. I think the Mercedes are looking great, and this Haas team just offers that great balance, great price gain potential. If we don't want to jump too much on the Haas, because I have gone a bit mental for the Haas, could be a bit more sensible, and I could personally just switch like a Gasly up to a Magnussen and just keep things completely simple and relatively safe. Maintain the big constructor points from the likes of Mercedes and the McLarens, and just rely on the Haas as purely C tier, which is probably more sensible, but it's less exciting. And sometimes you have to take a bit of a risk to be rewarded, and it may well backfire. But I'm kind of interested in building budget, as I've kind of stressed in my last team selection video before Silverstone. I do still believe that building budget is important. It's not like critical, and of course we must score points. We're halfway through the season now, so we're kind of in the home stretch to some extent. We are, every race that ticks off, we're moving further and further towards the end of the season, where budget obviously counts for nothing. Points count for everything, but I'm still conscious of being able to build budget to get bigger points as the season goes on, particularly when we want to lock in potentially like a Max Verstappen, a Lando Norris 3x, 2x combination at some point. A lot of us will have the 3x DRS boost still available, so I think building budget and building towards that is also kind of important. But just in general, I think just having more budget just gives you more opportunities. For example, people will have this team and they'll be able to drop a Piastri in quite comfortably, get Lando Norris in here instead. And there'll be people with Lando Norris sat here with Russell, Haas's, who are kind of optimal. Maybe even people that don't even need a Logan Sargent. They can get someone like a Sauber or even Alpine if you've got a big enough budget on top of these constructors. Imagine having Lando Norris in here for the 2 times. Oop, I just punched the mic again. Did that last week as well. I'm sorry. I'm just like, whoa, it's too good. Having Lando Norris in this team, it's just broken. You've won fantasy already. But no, honestly, I do think that building budget is important, because otherwise these guys that are sat here with the likes of Lando Norris on a team like this will just continue to draw away, pull away, and the top 100, top 500, top 1000 will just become this small little dot in the distance, and we won't be able to keep up with it. So I do think budget's important. And so I guess just to wrap it up a little bit is my thoughts on the other constructors and that. And obviously I haven't discussed any team selection other than pretty much obviously extensively about Haas. Very excited about Haas, but also Mercedes and McLaren. I do think that the current meta, if there is one, because there's not really a meta or a template, it's all a bit out there. There's all sorts of variety at the moment, but I do think that potentially over the next week or two before the summer break comes in, I do think we're going to see a lot of orange and Mercedes green in our teams. I think that's where we're heading. That's kind of where, if I reset my team there, where it is at the moment, that's kind of where I'm at personally already. I just need to kind of optimize the amount of green and orange that's in my team. So I think that's kind of where we're heading, because I think the likes of Red Bull, they're still plugging away, they're still scoring pretty well. Solid couple of outings in the last couple of weeks, even with likes of Perez not performing. But the problem is Perez is just awful at the moment. He's terrible, and there's no guarantee that he's even going to finish the season with Red Bull, let alone actually do well anytime soon. So yes, they're like, Verstappen's kind of dragging them up, their strategy's dragging them up, and their pit stops are dragging them up. But for me, for 29 million, this is just a big no. Like, when you can afford people like McLaren and Mercedes, or the Haas, I do think the Red Bulls are just completely off the radar for me personally. Similarly for Ferrari, they've just been shocking since Monaco. It's a complete opposite trajectory to the Haas. Basically, the Haas have just been doing super well after their disaster in Monaco, and the Ferraris have been sucking ever since pretty much. They did all right in Austria, although that was a sprint weekend, but in general, when the Ferraris, we thought that the Ferraris and Leclerc or even Sainz may be challenging, or at least hoping they would challenge for the constructor or the world championship. They're just kind of nowhere at the moment. They're really nowhere. Poor strategy. The upgrades just haven't worked. They even stripped the upgrades back to what they were, pre-Imola or whatever it was. So they're bouncing around with the new upgrades. So they've got rid of them. The Ferraris are just kind of off it for me as well. So yeah, kind of if the Red Bulls are off for me, the Ferraris are off. Obviously, the next best options are the McLarens and Mercedes, who thankfully are actually doing really well and enable us to spread our funds quite nicely, because they are cheaper assets in the moment in general. Well, McLarens aren't, to be fair, but McLarens are like the cheaper version of Red Bull. Mercedes are like the cheaper version of Ferrari, and they're just better at the moment. So why not fill your team with orange and green, like I say. That aside, the other, I guess there's not much to say about the rest of the budget guys. I think the Aston Martins are kind of a bit meh, not very exciting. They did okay in Silverstone, but I'm still kind of off it. Like I said earlier, Lance Stroll has now hit the 15 million mark, so he won't be getting any more of these 0.5 rises for doing nothing in the race. He's going to go alongside the likes of Alonso, Perez, Russell, etc., getting those smaller gains, and he's going to have to do more to get those gains as well. So Lance Stroll's just a big no for me. The RB is also pretty unexciting. I think the Alpines are still an option. I still think the likes of Gasly and Ocon. Ocon, who actually won around Hungary here, 2-3 years ago, whenever it was. Time absolutely flies. I lose track of what year. But Ocon did win around this track, admittedly in some fortunate circumstances with the wet weather and people crashing into each other, etc. But still, he did win around here. He'll have a lot of confidence, I'm sure. Apart from what happened in Silverstone, where they just took a wrong direction, I think, and bit of a naff strategy call for them. I do think the Alpines are still kind of on my radar, and I could potentially just sit on Gasly here and kind of be happy with it. Could even upgrade a Sargent. If it's an upgrade to a Sauber, I'm not even sure it's an upgrade at this stage. They kind of score similarly. They both drain money, so I might as well just keep some extra spare budget and keep Sargent until he lets me down at some point. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm thinking at the moment. Orange and green, lots of grey. That's the summary of my team selection. Orange, green, grey. Go. See you for the deadline stream, hopefully. Catch you soon. Bye.